Everywhere you go online, you are told the same reassuring line, your data stays on your device, so you're safe. That idea has become a kind of modern comfort blanket that people rarely question. If it doesn't leave your laptop or your PC, then it cannot really hurt you. But what if keeping your data local actually makes you more vulnerable? What if storing everything in one place, right there on your hard drive, turns your computer into the perfect target for anyone who wants to see exactly what you have been doing for the past 6 months? In 2024, Microsoft built a feature that forced security researchers to confront that uncomfortable truth. It was called Recall. Recall was designed to run quietly in the background of certain Windows machines, taking snapshots of your screen every few seconds and turning them into a permanent searchable memory of almost everything you did on that device. Not in the cloud, not on Microsoft servers, right there on your own computer. On paper, that sounds harmless, even helpful, because it fits the story you have been told for years. Local equals private, local equals secure. The problem is that your computer is not a safe, sealed box, and it is not only you who can reach into it. If someone compromises your account, installs malware, gains access at work, or even just borrows your unlocked laptop for a few minutes, local only suddenly means everything in one place, easy to grab in bulk. Security researchers demonstrated that early versions of Recall stored this history in a way that made it trivial for an attacker with user-level access to extract months of your digital life in seconds. This was not a conspiracy theory, not a hypothetical, but something that was tested and verified in real labs. In this video, you will see exactly how Recall worked and what investigators discovered when they pulled it apart. You will see why the backlash grew so intense that Microsoft had to delay, redesign, and effectively retreat from its original plan. You will also see what has actually changed since then, what remains risky even after those changes, and what concrete steps you can take today to protect yourself. Microsoft introduced Recall on May 20th, 2024, as part of its new Copilot Plus PC lineup, positioning it as an AI-powered memory assistant for your entire computing experience. The pitch was simple and genuinely useful on the surface. Recall would take snapshots of your screen every few seconds, analyze the content using optical character recognition and AI, and build a searchable timeline of everything you had ever done. If you were shopping online days ago and vaguely remembered seeing brown leather shoes but could not find them again, you could search Recall for brown leather shoes, and it would instantly show you the exact moment you were looking at them. The company emphasized that all of this data would stay local on your device, never uploaded to Microsoft's cloud servers, and encrypted using BitLocker. In the original plan, the feature was set to be enabled by default on all compatible devices starting June 18, 2024. But when cybersecurity researcher Kevin Beaumont got his hands on a pre-release version of Recall in early June 2024, he found something alarming. Beaumont discovered that Recall stored every single screenshot and all the text extracted from those screenshots in an unencrypted SQLite database located in a predictable folder within the user's app data directory. This was not hidden deep in the system or protected by advanced encryption. It was a standard database file that any malware with user-level permissions could access without needing administrator privileges. Beaumont demonstrated that an attacker could write just 2 lines of code to query this database, extract everything Recall had recorded, and compress months of user activity into a file small enough to exfiltrate in seconds. He tested it himself by typing fake credit card numbers and passwords while Recall was running, then used simple SQL queries to pull all of it back out. Everything was there, in plain text, fully readable and ready to be stolen. Another researcher, Alexander Hagena, confirmed the same findings and released proof-of-concept tools showing just how trivial the exploitation process was. This was not about sophisticated nation-state hackers breaking through layers of enterprise security. This was about everyday malware being able to harvest your entire digital life without breaking a sweat. The database contained everything: passwords you typed into login forms, financial information you entered on banking websites, private messages you sent through web applications, confidential documents you opened, and medical records you accessed. It even captured content from private browsing sessions that users assumed would leave no trace. In other words, Recall turned your screen into a continuous feed of sensitive information, then stored that feed in one place that was easy to query if you knew where to look. You might think that if you do not let strangers touch your laptop or install random software, you are safe from this kind of attack. That is a very common belief, and on the surface, it feels reasonable. But this assumption ignores how modern malware actually works. Many users unknowingly install malicious software disguised as legitimate applications, browser extensions, driver updaters, or even harmless-looking email attachments. Once that malware is running with your user permissions, it has full access to everything in your app data folder, including the recall database, without needing to escalate its privileges. The malware does not need to bypass Windows Defender in a spectacular way or use exotic exploits. It just needs to read a file that your own account is allowed to read. Even if your device never gets infected, there are other exposure risks that most people never consider. If your laptop is stolen or accessed by someone with physical access, they do not need to crack any complex encryption because the original recall database was not encrypted at the file level. Corporate IT departments that create system images or backups might inadvertently copy the recall database along with other user data, potentially exposing sensitive information in centralized storage systems. The database is also vulnerable during forensic recovery, meaning deleted recall data could potentially be reconstructed even after a user thinks it has been erased. For shared computers in households or small offices, anyone with access to the device could potentially query the recall database and see everything another user had been doing. The reaction from regulators and privacy experts was swift and unambiguous once these details became public. On June 5, 2024, the UK Information Commissioner's Office announced it was making inquiries with Microsoft to understand what safeguards were in place to protect user privacy with recall. The ICO issued a public statement emphasizing that organizations must be transparent about how user data is used and should only process personal data to the extent necessary. The regulator stressed that industry must consider data protection from the outset and rigorously assess risks to people's rights and freedoms before bringing products to market. While the ICO did not announce formal enforcement action or fines, the inquiry itself signaled serious concerns about whether recall complied with GDPR principles, particularly data minimization, transparency, and meaningful consent. Privacy advocates were even more direct in their criticism. Meredith Whittaker, president of the encrypted messaging app Signal, publicly slammed recall as a dangerous honeypot for hackers, warning that screenshots could contain sensitive information, including disappearing messages sent through privacy-focused apps. Even though Signal encrypts messages end-to-end and offers disappearing messages that automatically delete after being read, Recall would capture screenshots of those messages before they disappeared, effectively creating a permanent record. Barry Briggs, a former chief technology officer of Microsoft's own IT unit, cautioned that Recall would inevitably capture sensitive interactions and content that users never intended to have recorded. These were not fringe voices or anonymous commentators. These were respected figures in technology and cybersecurity, expressing alarm about a feature that fundamentally shifted the balance between convenience and surveillance. To understand why this matters beyond abstract privacy principles, consider what kinds of information Recall could capture in real-world situations. Imagine a person experiencing domestic violence who uses their computer to research escape, routes, contact shelters, or seek legal advice. Recall would take snapshots of every support website they visited, every search term they entered, and every resource they accessed. If an abusive partner gained even brief access to that computer, they could see exactly what the victim had been planning, potentially putting that person in immediate physical danger. Privacy researchers at Brave Software specifically highlighted this scenario, noting that Recall makes it extremely difficult for privacy-focused browsers to protect vulnerable users because the feature operates at the operating system level. Consider a journalist working with confidential sources, typing notes during a sensitive interview, or receiving encrypted messages that appear briefly on screen before being deleted. Recall would capture those moments, creating a permanent record that could be subpoenaed, hacked, or accessed through legal compulsion, potentially exposing sources who were promised anonymity. Think about healthcare workers who access patient records on their computers, or therapists who type session notes containing deeply personal mental health information. Even though those professionals are bound by strict confidentiality laws like HIPAA, Recall would create a secondary unsecured copy of that protected health information in a local database that might not meet the same legal standards. In corporate environments, employees working on confidential projects, reviewing trade secrets, or negotiating contracts would have all of that sensitive business information recorded in Recall. Lawyers reviewing privileged communications, financial advisors accessing client portfolios, and government employees handling sensitive information would all face similar risks. Facing an unprecedented wave of criticism, Microsoft announced major changes to Recall on June 7, 2024, just 11 days before the scheduled launch. The company delayed the rollout and said it would fundamentally redesign the security architecture. The most significant change was making Recall opt-in rather than enabled by default. During setup for Copilot Plus PCs, users would now see a clear prompt asking whether they wanted to enable Recall, and if they did not actively choose to turn it on, the feature would remain off. Microsoft also added encryption and biometric authentication requirements. The updated version implemented just-in-time decryption, meaning recall snapshots would only be decrypted when the user authenticated using Windows Hello, which relies on facial recognition, fingerprint scanning, or a secure PIN. According to Microsoft, this meant that even if malware accessed the recall database files, they would be encrypted and unreadable without successful biometric authentication. The company also introduced content filtering options, allowing users to specify which apps and websites should be excluded from snapshots. It became possible to completely uninstall recall through the Windows Optional Features settings. These changes were real improvements and showed that Microsoft had listened to the backlash. But despite these improvements, security researchers continued to find meaningful problems. In July 2025, testing revealed that recall still captured sensitive information, including credit card numbers, passwords, and personal data, even with the new filters in place. The filters designed to prevent recall from recording certain types of sensitive content were inconsistent and failed in common scenarios. More troubling, biometric protection had a significant weakness. Users could choose to protect recall with a simple PIN instead of facial recognition or fingerprint scanning. That meant your entire digital history could be protected by nothing more than a short code that someone could watch you type or guess. It is the equivalent of locking a vault full of your life with the same level of security as a gym locker. Research also showed that even the encrypted version of recall could be vulnerable if an attacker gained access to your device while you were actively logged in, because the database would already be decrypted and accessible during your active session. In that scenario, the just-in-time encryption does not help you. The fundamental architecture remained the same, a comprehensive record of your digital activity stored in one centralized location, creating what security experts call a high-value target. By concentrating that much sensitive data in one place, recall makes your device exponentially more attractive to attackers, even if some layers of protection have been added on top. If you're using a Windows device that might support recall, particularly if you have or plan to purchase a Copilot Plus PC, there are specific steps you can take right now. First, and most importantly, do not opt into recall when prompted during setup. The feature is now off by default, meaning it will only activate if you explicitly choose to enable it. If you're unsure whether recall is already active on your system, you can check and disable it manually. Open the Settings app, navigate to Privacy and Security, then select Recall and Snapshots. Look for the toggle labeled Save Snapshots and make sure it's switched to the off position. That alone cuts off the fire hose of screenshots being written to your device. If you want to go further and completely remove recall from your system, go to Settings, then Apps, then Optional Features, find Recall in the list, select it, and choose Uninstall. This will delete any snapshots that were previously saved and remove the feature entirely from your device. For users comfortable with more advanced settings, you can also disable recall through group policy on Windows Pro or Enterprise editions. Beyond recall specifically, consider reviewing your broader Windows privacy settings. Go to Settings, then Privacy and Security, and examine the permissions you've granted for diagnostics and feedback, activity history, and app-specific access to your camera, microphone, location, and documents. Turn off any data collection features you don't actively use or need. Your operating system no longer exists just to help you get work done or browse the web. It has become a data collection instrument, gathering information about your behavior, your habits, and your private life in ways that would have seemed dystopian just a decade ago. Recall represents a turning point because it makes that surveillance continuous, searchable, and vulnerable in ways that even Microsoft's own engineers did not adequately anticipate. The feature launched with fundamental security flaws, was pulled back after public outcry, rebuilt with better protections, and still contains weaknesses that put real people at real risk. You now have two choices. Option 1, open your Windows settings, navigate to Privacy and Security, find recall if it exists on your device, and make absolutely certain it's disabled or uninstalled. Option 2, share this video with someone you know who uses Windows, especially if they're not deeply technical, because they might have no idea this feature even exists or what it's capable of recording. Leave a comment telling which option you chose, because accountability drives action, and it matters that people not only hear this, but act on it. Next week, another investigation will look at a different piece of technology that offers convenience at the cost of your privacy. If you want to stay ahead of these risks instead of learning about them after it's too late, subscribe now. The companies building these systems are betting you will not pay attention. Prove them wrong.